Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Haribol, 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 Nitai Gora, Haribol. Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jai Jai Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajacharya Ashtatara Shatashi Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shishu, Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, which is called, does anyone know what Canto 3 is called? Title of the canto? So each canto has a title. Canto 3 is called The Status Quo. I suppose it sort of establishes a theme. I haven't spent enough time meditating on why the title Status Quo is significant. The first canto is called Creation. Second canto is called, it's also in Sanskrit, it has a term, it's called Sarga. And then second canto is called Visarga, which means secondary creation. Or so the first creation is the manifestation from Mahavishnu. Second is what Brahma does with all the ingredients that he has. So it's a secondary creation. So the whole canto is titled like that. And this one that we're doing now is called Status Quo. It also ties in with the 10 purposes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 10 subjects of the Srimad Bhagavatam, which we're not going to go into today, but that's a whole thing in itself. So today we're reading from the third canto, which is Status Quo. The chapter is called The Victory of Hiranyaksha. It's got a larger title. Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. We're going to do 28, 29, 30, and 31. Sometimes I know at the beginning of classes, you come and you think, I'm going to sit for class. And then you get a bit itchy, a bit bored, and you think, I'm going to leave now because I've got something else to do. This isn't that good a class. So just to give beforehand a little idea of what sort of subjects I'm going to talk about. It's also you can sort of think about these things yourself. As we're reading the verses, things may come up for yourselves that you want to ask about, that you want more understanding of, more information about. So the purpose of Bhagavatam class is not just to listen to somebody go like this. It's to go deeper, just learning. Yeah, that's the correct verse. That's the first one, that's 28. Do you write that? Thanks. So I'm going to talk about the divine and demoniac natures, the divisions of people in this world. It's from the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Because this is a brief exchange between Varuna, a demigod, god of the waters, and also Hiranyaksha, who we've been hearing a lot about. He's been in the heavenly planets, and now he's gone into the ocean. We've heard about him wandering the ocean for years. So he's obviously not an ordinary being. He's not a being of our sort of... He's a different caliber of being if he can wander about underneath the ocean for years and years and years. And the exchange they have, these few verses, a very brief exchange, you'll see. It's basically a display of the differences between the divine and the demonic. We see the unrestrained nature of Hiranyaksha, and we see the restraint shown by Varuna. So we're going to talk about what are these qualities, divine, demoniac, why Krishna makes specific point of these are the main divisions, these are the divisions in this world. We think in terms of man, woman, we think in terms of race, we think in terms of rich and poor. We have all kinds of ways of dividing people up. But Krishna says all living beings in this material world, they're divided according to these two, divine and demoniac. These are the significant divisions. So we're going to look into that. So if that's worth listening to, then you can stick around. So this, we're going to read together. The purpose of reading the Sanskrit verse is to get a little more acquainted with Sanskrit, because it's a lot of sounds and it can be bewildering. I was sitting with it this morning, and all of a sudden I remembered what it was like when I first started reading Bhagavad Gita, first started reading Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's a little overwhelming, all the letters and the sounds, and how do you say it, what sort of rhythm has it got, trying to find some pattern in it, trying to understand the meaning of it. It can be a little overwhelming. But the good news is if you stick with it, it leads to a great amount of relish. We're also going to talk about that. The beginning of the Bhagavatam. Take some inspiration from a class I listened to the other day, the Sri Chaitanya Prabhu. He took a verse from the early part of the Bhagavatam. He took a verse also from the later, the 12th canto, the end of the Bhagavatam. There's a nice sort of sense of how vast this body of work is. And those bookends of the Bhagavatam, they have some beautiful verses there which give us inspiration about what is the Bhagavatam and why we sit every day and just listen to it and recite it and discuss it. So this is text 28. Tvam lokapalo dhipatir brihatstrava. Lokapalo dhipatir brihatstrava. Viryapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke khila daitya danavan. Yadraja suyena puraya jat prabho. Tvang lokapalo dhipatir brihatstrava. Viryapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke khila daitya danavan. Yadraja suyena puraya jat prabho. Tvang lokapalo dhipatir brihatstrava. Virapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke khila daitya danavar. Yadrajasuyena paraya jat prabho. Twang lokapalo dipatir brihachtrava. Viryapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke kiladaitya danavan. Yadrajasuyena puraya jat prabho. Tvam lokapalo dipatir vihachtrava. Iryapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke kiladaitya danavan. Yadrajasuyena puraya jat prabho. One more? Okay. Lang lokapalo dipati brihachtrava. Viryapaho durmada viramanina. Vijitya loke kiladaitya danavan. Yadrajasuyena puraya jat prabho. So the first part of the reading is we get used to the sounds, how it bounces along. It has parts that go slow, parts that go fast, and you have to pick. There are particular meters or rhythms or ways to recite verses. I just picked one that seemed to fit with this number of syllables. Different ones, like Bhagavad Gita has different. Bhagavad Gita sounds like Deshan Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam. It's a different meter. So I just picked one that sounded right for this. I'm not an expert in which meter is meant for which. So that's the purpose of the first part. This part, we're getting a sense of understanding what the Sanskrit means. So repeat after me. Tvam, you, Varuna. So this is Hiranyaksha speaking. All he said so far is, give me battle, O Supreme Lord, speaking to Varuna. This is him continuing. So he's addressing Varuna. Lokapalaha, guardian of the planet. Adhipati, a ruler. Brihatshrava, of wide fame. Virya, the power. Apaha, diminished. Durmada, of the proud. Viramaninam means thinking themselves very big heroes. Vijitya, having conquered. Loke, in the world. Akila, all. Daitya, the demons. Danavan, the Danavas. Yat, whence. Rajasuyena, with a Rajasuya sacrifice. Pura, formerly. Ayajat, worshipped. Prabho, O Lord. So the translation. You are the guardian of an entire sphere and a ruler of wide fame, having crushed the might of arrogant and conceited warriors and having conquered all the Daityas and Danavas in the world. You once performed a Rajasuya sacrifice to the Lord. I feel like saying something straight away about this because it gives us context for what's coming next. Is that okay? Start speaking a little bit now and just do the rest of the verses as we go. So there is this Rajasuya sacrifice comes up again and again. The more you read Mahabharata, it comes up a lot. It comes up in, I think, in the Ramayana as well. This Rajasuya, it comes up all through the Bhagavatam. Rajasuya is a big sacrifice. The purpose of Rajasuya is to establish sovereignty, establish benevolent control. Sometimes when you say just establish control, our experience is that it's not always so benevolent, but the purpose of Rajasuya was to establish benevolent control. And the only way you could do Rajasuya was if you'd conquered all the neighboring kings. So you had everybody was willing to abide by the direction that you were as a king, as a kshatriya, as a ruler. But you were also in line as well. You weren't the supreme ruler. You were acting on behalf of the supreme person. So one name for king is Narapati. Naradev. This is God on earth, because they're representative. They acted as representatives of the supreme person. So oftentimes Rajasuya sacrifices are done, there's not just one. Sometimes they say like someone did 3 Rajasuya sacrifices, sometimes somebody did 100, and it's a very significant thing because it's a huge endeavor to do the Rajasuya, this sacrifice for that purpose. So here he just mentions that you once performed Rajasuya sacrifice to the Lord. So in a way he's kind of, it may sort of skip our hearing, he's kind of speaking down to him by saying that. So, and he hasn't conquered everybody. He says he's just conquered the Daityas and the Danavas. These are races of demoniac persons. So they're not the whole universe. He's just conquered the Daityas and the Danavas, and he's once performed Rajasuya sacrifice. So it might escape our hearing, but what he's saying here in the context of what is Rajasuya and who are these Daityas and Danavas, he's belittling him. And so you see now in his reaction, his response, Varuna's response, I'll just say it. He says, Saeva mutsiktam madena vidvisha dridham pralabdho bhagavana pangpati roshang samuttam shamayam swayadhiya vyavochadango pashamam gatavayam. The translation is, thus mocked by an enemy. So when I first read that, I couldn't see, like, how is he mocking him? He said good things about him. I had to look a little bit more closely to see there's a subtle kind of mockery in that. Thus mocked by an enemy whose vanity knew no bounds. The worshipful Lord of the waters waxed angry. So Varuna's response is he feels anger rising up. But by dint of his reason, this is important, this is the basis of today's reading. We've been hearing about Hiranyaksha's uncontrolled nature, that he just can't stop himself. So here we have an example of somebody who feels anger rising, but by dint of his reason managed to curb the anger, it says, that had sprung up in him. And he replied, "O dear one," he addresses Hiranyaksha as, "O dear one, we have now desisted from warfare, having grown too old for combat." So he excuses himself from the offer for battle. The purport, small purport, one sentence says, as we see, warmongering materialists always create fighting without reason. Because there's no reason for Hiranyaksha to come and request battle with Varuna. He's just agitated, just wants to fight for no reason. Which is the nature of the demoniac. We're going to find that out. So the third verse of the 4 that we're reading is Pashami Nanyam Purushat Puratanad Yasang Yuge Twang Rana Marga Koviram Arada Yishyat Yanu Yanasura Rash Behi Tam Manasvino Yang Grinate Bhavadrisha. He continues addressing Hiranyaksha, "You are so skilled in war that I do not see anyone else but the most ancient person, Lord Vishnu, who can give satisfaction in battle to you. Therefore, O chief of the Asuras, approach him, whom even heroes like you mention with praise." There's a two-sentence purport. It says, aggressive materialistic warriors are actually punished by the Supreme Lord for their policy of unnecessarily disturbing world peace. Therefore, Varuna advised Hiranyaksha that the right course to satisfy his fighting spirit would be to seek to fight with Vishnu. So the nature of material desire is that it's never satisfied. So he has his desire to fight, which is an aspect of material desire. There's no real satisfaction going to come from it, except when he is purified or by the Lord, punished by killed by the Lord, and that excessive material desire is extinguished with his life. So then the last verse is 31. Tang viramarada vipadya vismaya shayishyase virashaye shwabir brita yastvad vidhanam asatam prashantaye rupani dhatte sadanugrahech anugrahech chaya. Varuna continued, and this is the last verse. He says, on reaching him, meaning the Supreme Lord, you will be rid of your pride at once and will lie down on the field of battle, surrounded by dogs for eternal sleep. It is in order to exterminate wicked fellows like you and to show his grace to the virtuous that he assumes his various incarnations like Varaha. And the purport, small one again, says, Asuras do not know that their bodies consist of the 5 elements of material nature, and that when they fall, they become objects of pastimes for dogs and vultures. Varuna advised Hiranyaksha to meet Vishnu in his boar incarnation so that his hankering for aggressive war would be satisfied and his powerful body would be vanquished. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 3rd canto, 17th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Victory of Hiranyaksha over all the directions of the universe. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinataranam. These prayers are for expressing one's own inability to say anything of substance or value, but by the grace of spiritual master, by the grace of hearing from such a spiritual master, then one may be able to speak something of value. So the first thing just to give us a little sense of Bhagavatam's stature, go to Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, which is called Creation, then Sub-creation. So the first one's Creation. We have this verse. It's Bhagavatam 1, so 1st canto, .1, 1st chapter, text number 3. This is the 3rd verse of the whole Bhagavatam, as we have it. Because sometimes Bhagavatam, we've heard that in different parts of the universe, Bhagavatam is larger. Bhagavatam is sometimes smaller, sometimes larger. So because Bhagavatam is transcendental by its nature, its content is ever expanding. It's not a limited, it doesn't have a beginning and an end as such. It's bigger than its limitations, its apparent limitations. So this verse, this 3rd verse in the Bhagavatam says, Nigama kalpaturur galitang palam. Nigama refers to the Vedic literatures, and it refers to them as a desire tree, the tree of Vedic literatures. The desire tree, because they have a capacity, a potential. It doesn't mean that that's an automatic thing, but there's a potential for us to fulfill all desires by connection, by study of these literatures. That's the opportunity of studying the Bhagavatam. They represent a desire tree. But what is the Bhagavatam in this whole tree? Because all the Vedas, Nigama Kalpataror, all the Vedas, Nigama is the name for Vedas in Sanskrit, is Nigama, the Vedic literatures. Kalpataru, we say every day the Shikshashtakam, the third verse of the Shikshashtakam, which I feel like is something that we also need to take some time to study and read up on outside of the morning program. Because in the morning program, sometimes it's very rushed. In the morning program, sometimes we're not sure what we're saying. We're still learning what the words are. We take time outside of the class to study it because it's such an important presentation by Lord Chaitanya. Lord Chaitanya's only 8 verses that he himself left. The rest of it he left to the Goswamis, his direct followers, to write all those literatures that they wrote. Lord Chaitanya only left these 8 verses, and we recite them every day, so we can understand in the context of the bhakti process, they are significant, they're important. So it makes sense to take some time to study them independently, study them separately from this class. I'm thinking to do something similar to that for the ashram. Study these things that we, like the prayers that we sing every day, so that we have a deeper sense of what they mean, so that when we're singing them, we can enter into the meaning and the significance or the relevance that they hold for us, instead of just being there and just going along and doing it by rote, which is there's less value there. So this Vedic literature is referred to as a desire tree, and the Bhagavatam is referred to as the fruit, the ripened fruit of that desire tree. So you can see in the context of that, what is a tree? The purpose of a tree, it can give many things. A tree gives shade, it gives shelter, it gives fruits, but the ultimate product of the tree is its fruit. Once it produces its flowers, they then transform into the fruit, and we eat the fruit, and we get nourished by that. So the tree produces this ultimate product, the fruit. So you could say the Bhagavatam is the ultimate product of the Vedas. If we understand its etymology and where it came from, Vyas, who's the compiler of all the Vedic texts, so Krishna comes himself, but he also comes as his own biographer in a separate form to write down all these things that take place, to take notes, to document it. So Krishna appears with all his close associates, all his entourage, all his friends, and they engage in loving pastimes. And then he also comes as Vyas and documents all the pastimes. So Vyas has that unique place, the author of all the compiler of all the Vedic texts. But at the beginning of this age the current time that we're living, he foresaw that the people of this age would be subject to many, what do we call them? Collectively, you could refer to them as just difficulties. Shukadev Goswami, who's the son of Vyas, he says, what's that verse describing the qualities of the Kali Yuga, the inhabitants of the age? Yeah, that's the translation of it. It's Manda Sumanda Matayo Manda Bhagya Hyapadrita Prabhu. You know that verse? Manibanda? Anyway, it does not. We have this verse from Shukadev Goswami, who's the son of Vyas, describing the qualities of the age of Kali, the inhabitants of the age of Kali. They are short-lived. They have short lives. They're lazy, quarrelsome, unlucky, and above all, always disturbed. But that sounds like a pretty unfair description. But what he's giving us a description of is this age, the inhabitants of this age, in comparison to other ages. So in previous ages, because the very first thing he says is short life. Some people will argue that we're living longer now than we used to. So if you could think back into the previous centuries, people lived, they were cut down by various diseases. But due to the advances of modern medicine, we've been able to cure those diseases. We don't have bubonic plague anymore. We don't have so many of the diseases that existed in the past because we've advanced past that. Now we're living longer. But what that statement sort of fails to sort of take note of is that the statement of Shukadeva Goswami refers to all the ages, not just the last 5,000 years. The current age has been in existence since the last 5,000 years, thereabouts. But prior to that, there was the previous age. We have this information from the Bhagavatam and from the Vedic literatures that this is not the only age, that history didn't begin as far as we understand history. Most history that we study at schools is not older than 5,000 years old, as though nothing happened back then. And then also the way it's been presented by materialistic science is that humans, anatomically modern human beings, have only existed for 100,000, 200,000 years. They keep changing the date, but it's not very long. So before that, they say that there was just lower life forms, apes developing into human beings, evolving from unicellular life forms, and then everything came from an explosion. It requires an act of faith in order to believe in such a proposal, and it's not based upon facts, but only theory. So the theory of evolution. So the whole point of what I'm trying to say is that the presentation of the Vedas and the Vedic literatures and Vyas is that he's given us the essence of understanding of this world. So Nigama Kalpataror, it's a desire tree. And the Bhagavatam is the fruit of that desire tree. So the translation goes, "O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam." And this is the point. I mean, I could get right into the verse, but I'm conscious of the time, and I want to leave time for discussion, questions and answers. And at one point when I was researching to do this class, I was thinking, I've got nothing. And then at another point I think, geez, I've got too much. I don't know what I'm going to leave out. And then I went back to, I've got nothing again. And now I seem to have, found some content, but I mean, I could easily sort of take up the rest of the time just discussing this one verse. I just wanted to touch on this verse, just to give us a context of appreciation for Bhagavatam, which, whether we're attending regularly or whether we've just dropped in to have a listen online or in this class today, Bhagavatam is worth examining more closely. And this is what it says in this verse, 113, "O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadeva Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls." So the significance of that last statement, relishable for all, doesn't matter what kind of person we are, Bhagavatam has a capacity to captivate us. If we give it that hearing, that kind of ear where we hear very carefully without prejudice, without our own sort of stuff getting in the way. Just try and hear it very carefully and very clearly. And each day you'll be in a different state, so it'll filter through in a different way. But if we try to hear purely in an unfiltered way, it has a capacity to captivate us, to become very powerfully relishable. And this last, already relishable for all, he says, has become more relishable because it's been touched by the lips of Shukadeva Goswami, who's the speaker of the Bhagavatam. But relishable for all, including liberated souls. Because the nature of a liberated soul, to understand that statement, we have to understand the nature of a liberated soul. Liberated soul means no material desire. They don't have material desires anymore. That's the nature of liberation, because it's those desires which bind us to the temporary world, bind us to a world of dead ends. birth and death. To become liberated means to not have the desire which causes us to be here in the first place. Because those desires, material desires, what keeps us coming back. So liberated soul means that person. So if they have no material desires, what interest do they have in reading anything if they're liberated? But it notes that the Bhagavatam is relishable for all, including liberated souls. That liberated souls, when this Bhagavatam was spoken, if you ever have a look in the front, you see there's an assembly there. Has anyone looked at this before? Right. So we see this Shukadeva Goswami, Parikshit Maharaj, and look at all the assembled sages. There's demigods, Narad Muni's there, Vyasa's there, they're all there. Liberated souls. Why have they come to hear this Bhagavatam? Why are they so attracted? They're liberated, they don't have any desires, they're self-satisfied. Another phrase for the liberated soul is Atma Rama, which their satisfaction comes from within. So then why are they? Because they came from they came from all over, and they came for a long time. They sat for a lengthy, not just like 45 minutes in the morning. They sat for many hours, many days. How long did it take to speak the Bhagavatam? 7 days, of course, because Parikshit Maharaj's curse was that he was to die in 7 days. So they had 7 days. They could have taken longer, but they all sat there, rapt attention, these liberated souls, because Bhagavatam has something transcendental. Its content, its ability to captivate, transcends material desire. So even liberated souls, particularly you could say liberated souls, are attracted to this Bhagavatam. So we can understand that we find some way to relish it now, but we can also understand that even at a point of, as we progress on a spiritual path, and that's what we want to get into now, progressing from what to what. Spiritual path is about progressing from the demonic nature, because it's not just about this guy we're reading about here. It's not just about the people out there who are doing harm to the world, which it speaks about in the purport here. Verse 30 says, aggressive materialistic warriors are actually punished by the Supreme Lord for their policy of unnecessarily disturbing world peace. It's not just about those people who are disturbing the world. It's not just about these giant demons in the origins of the universe. It's also the demonic nature, as Krishna explains in the 16th chapter. It's present within each of us. The opportunity, the potential. And then if we understand that it's there, we also understand that the divine nature is also there. We can give more nourishment and sustenance to the divine nature and experience relief from victimization from the modes of nature. Experience relief from the excesses of anxiety and stress and difficulty and confusion that occur so frequently and so readily in this life, in this world. So this is about solution to the problems of life, solution to suffering. And it's relishable. So this is the first point. Sometimes we may not understand. This is 113, very early in the Bhagavatam. We may not always understand what it is that we're reading. What's the point about reading about these giant persons who, what relevance has it to me? In the beginning, we may not always understand, but we can always relish. And that's what Vyasadeva is saying. He says, Pibata Bhagavatam. Pibata means do relish. And in the translation it says just relish. So if we're seeking understanding, there's nothing wrong with that. But understanding will come through the act of relishment. By taking the opportunity to try to enter into the flavors here. Enter into even the sounds of the Sanskrit, the beautiful Sanskrit poetry. Even if we think these things are just stories, fairy tales, they're good stories. So we can relish from that perspective. We can relish a perspective of learning another language. There's so many ways that we can, and Prabhupada says this in the early part of the introduction to either Bhagavad Gita or Bhagavatam, he talks about that it will be appealing to many different classes of person. Those who are in a scholarly position, it'll appeal to them because of its presentation is very scholarly. Religionists, it will appeal to them because it has the essence of all principles which uphold a progressive life. It also appeals to, because it's fantastic stories, everyone likes to hear a story, so it'll appeal to people on that level. Multiple personalities will find it appealing, and that's what we're being told to do, relish. And through relish, understanding will come. If we seek just to understand with our intellect, academically understand these things, it's said that it will always remain outside of our grasp. Our grasp of it will always be limited. So the next point is from the as I was preparing for the class, I was listening to someone's reading of chapter 10, text 9 of the Bhagavad Gita. And it's a very beautiful reference to the Srimad Bhagavatam. So another little key to connecting with the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, these are the main texts that we engage with. They have 4 nutshell verses. 4 seed verses. So it means that the whole of the 18,000 verses of the Bhagavatam is contained within 4 verses only. And Ahameva Sameva Agre, you can make a study of those verses. But Bhagavad Gita also has these 4 nutshell verses. And this in chapter 10, and the texts 8, 9, 10 and 11. So we're going to look here at a portion of the purport from that second of the seed verses. So you want to understand the essence of Bhagavad Gita, read the introduction. Srila Prabhupada's very beautifully. An introduction sometimes we think of as just that stuff happens in the beginning of a book, just before you start reading. And some people don't even bother with an introduction, they just flip and start reading. And so some introductions, fair enough, are kind of lay labour on, and they're a bit sort of hard to get through, and you'd wonder what's the point of all this. But the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita that Srila Prabhupada wrote, which has been published as a book in and of itself, a separate little booklet, Introduction to Bhagavad Gita, it's like he takes Krishna's hand, takes your hand, and he's introducing you to Krishna. That introduction gives a synopsis of the whole Bhagavad Gita. It explains the relevance of it for us, because the value is only going to be there if we understand why it's relevant to me, because we tend to be, just by the nature of our existence, we tend to be self-absorbed when we're looking out for our own interests. So why is this of interest to me? Why should I pay attention to this? That's what that introduction is going to give us. And then the other thing about Bhagavad Gita, we want to capture the essence of Bhagavad Gita, study these 4 verses. Chapter 10, text 8, 9, 10 and 11. So here in the second of those verses, we have this in the purport. The Srimad Bhagavatam, again, it's about appreciating Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationship between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. So that's what Bhagavatam means. Srimad means beautiful, it's just to put it simply. Bhagavatam means that narration about the Lord and his devotees and the dynamic loving interaction. Bhagavan, Bhaktas and Bhakti. That's the essence of everything. It's this loving relationships that exist. So that's what he's saying here, is the Srimad Bhagavatam is also full of such narrations about the relationships between the Supreme Lord and his devotees. Therefore, Srimad Bhagavatam is very dear to the devotees for that reason, because they're hearing about the dynamic loving interactions. It's not always, sometimes there's disturbances in that love, and then something has to be done about it. So we're hearing about, it's more broad than just just simply nice, loving interactions. But the point is made here that it's very dear to devotees, as stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam itself, which we're going to go to now. 12.13.18, this verse, Srimad Bhagavatam Puranam Amalam Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. Many devotees know this verse. It's a famous verse, often quoted verse, glorifying the Bhagavatam at the end of the Bhagavatam. So we've had a verse from the beginning of Bhagavatam, and we're going to go right to the end. Have a look at this. It says, in this narration, just to finish this piece of purport, there is nothing about material activities, nothing about economic development, nothing about sense gratification or liberation. What's the significance of those four things? Is that the four goals of human life are called purusharthas. They're stated as dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. Dharma means an understanding of the context that we exist within. So a sense of it's all coming from a supreme person. And in one sense, nothing exists except for this person, one person. And everything that we see which seems to be separate from said person is just the energies of that person. So supreme energetic person, just like we are persons, we have our energies. Manifestations of our energy would be the clothes we wear, the cars we drive. That if you see someone's car, you'll think of them because it's a manifestation of their energy. So we are persons and we have our energy. And there's some people who are more accomplished, more intelligent, less, more beautiful, less, more. There's all these different gradations of these qualities, these attractive qualities. The Supreme Person is that person who possesses all qualities to an unlimited degree simultaneously. So that person also is a person, the Supreme Person, and he's the origin of all other persons, and he has unlimited qualities. So this is the name Bhagavan, is what Bhagavan means. So it says here that in this narration there's nothing about material activities, economic development, sense gratification or liberation. These four things which govern and give direction and progress to human life, there's nothing about these because it's trying to take us beyond this birth and death, beyond a world where everything is coming to a dead end. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the only narration, it says, in which the transcendental nature of the Supreme Lord and his devotees is fully described. Thus the realized souls in Krishna consciousness take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literatures, just as a young boy and girl take pleasure in association. So something that's so fundamentally natural and understood by all, the pleasure of association between a young boy and girl. It's saying that in the same way, realized souls take continual pleasure in hearing such transcendental literature. So they relish the same kind of, like there's an infatuation there. If you think about that kind of attraction, it overwhelms. It takes over your heart and your mind. You can't think properly. Everything's discombobulated inside because of that attraction. So those who are realized souls, they have that same kind of dynamic with Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's just the last thing I would say before we run out of time, and I'm sorry for that. I apologize for that. But the last thing I was going to say is I remember seeing way back when I had anything to do with Facebook, which I haven't been on for so many years now, but I remember one devotee, brahmachari from somewhere, and he, in his relationship status, he said he was in a relationship with the Srimad Bhagavatam. And at the time, I was thinking, I sort of, I laughed to myself, I thought this is silly, it's a joke. But then when I thought about it a little more, there's actually substance to that, because when you hear this kind of statement, there's great substance to that. That you can be in a relationship with Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not a book. It is a manifestation of the Supreme Person, who's the origin of all loving relationships and loving dynamics. So in a very real sense, we can enter into a relationship with Srimad Bhagavatam and relish it. And we're out of time. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Bhagavatam ki jai.
Thank you for the class. Very nice class. I just have a quick question. During the class, you mentioned how we think we've advanced scientifically to prolong life and that we're living longer than we ever have before, and comparatively to a time that we don't have much information on, we're actually still very short-lived. So you didn't kind of complete that. Like, I'm curious how long back in the times of when Krishna came with his associates, like how long were people living back then?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's descriptions in the Vedic literatures of different ages, how long the age lasts for, and how long the inhabitants tend to live for. So every living being, from perspective of Bhagavatam, it talks about 100 years is like a lifespan. 100 years is not a literal 100 years. So an ant has its 100 years. A moth has its 100 years, but it's just one afternoon. The moth hatches, flies around a light, mates, and then gives up its life, and the next morning you see its body's lying there. But that's the moth's 100 years. So it uses that terminology like that. Brahma has his 100 years, which is, I always forget. No, that's just a day, yeah. So the opposite end, so he's way longer, but that's his 100 years. So our 100 years now, we could take, if we want to take that as our measure of other, because that's what we know, that's what we understand. Comparatively to our 100 years now, in the previous age to this, before 5,000 years, was the Dwapara Yuga. They lived for 1,000 years. That's by comparison. For them, it was just 100 years. It was just a lifespan. But it was 1,000 years by comparison to our years. Yeah. And the age before that, the Treta Yuga, was 10,000 years by comparison to ours. And then the original age, the Krita Yuga or the Satya Yuga, was 100,000 years. And so the processes for elevation of consciousness and liberation from birth, death, old age, disease were different in each age. So in the first age, there was the process of meditation. You sit for a long, long period of time, developing your ability to sit still first. So you drill your breath and you get your body in order so that you can sit for a long period of time without having a sore back, without your mind thinking, I'm going to go do something else now. And then after that, you sit in meditation for another 10,000 years. You had that amount of time, so that process was designed for that age. People try and do things like that now, like silent meditation. It's not designed for the age we're living in terms of achieving the outcomes, the results. So in the second age, the process was around fire sacrifice and all that's entailed with that. Deity worship was the emphasis and the focal point of the Dwapara Yuga. That was the process for liberation, for purification. And in this age, it's the sound vibration, the chanting of the names of the Lord. Sankirtan is the yajna, the sacrifice. So that's why it says statements about the Kali Yuga. It says things like, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way. It doesn't mean there's nothing else of value. It just means in this age, in the current time that we're living now, with our lifespan and our capacity, relative ability or inability to understand these things, it's the only thing that works anymore. Other things may be good for another time, for another type of living being, but for us in this time, this is the only thing that works now. So it gives us a good focus, gives us a good opportunity to focus and use our 100 years, however long that it is for us, because it could be tomorrow. That's how we emphasize the value of a moment. Is that if you live the moment as if it was your last moment, you do things that are of ultimate value, because you may not have that opportunity tomorrow.